Hello, Kuba. Hi. Congratulations. Thank you very much. They say fourth place is the worst in the world. Well, you could always say that depending on how you look at it, but Dakar, extremely strong competition, competitors from all over the world who are all champions of the wheel from their respective seats. Names that you could say I once had on posters in my room. So honestly, it's an honor for me to be able to race against them. And well, I'm happy that I'm in the place where I am, where we are simply. Yeah, I laugh because I myself couldn't believe the kind of people who are behind you. And we've talked more than once about Dakar, that there is no Dakar Rally. I think that's confirmed every year now. The rally is definitely extremely tough. The Dakar Rally is famous for being tough, but if you really think about it, it's very easy to justify just how tough it is. First of all, we have 2 weeks of racing. Every day we cover about 800 kilometers, and the conditions are very difficult, so those are the simplest things to point out. But the hardest thing about Dakar is, of course, the super fast driving. That adrenaline, that stress that's there, that constant struggle and battle with the other competitors. At every turn, the organizers are just trying to get you lost with the navigation, so we have to find our way. We have to find the right route. The clock is always ticking, so there's always that pressure, and it's a huge source of stress. Exactly, you have all these big names around you, like Carlos Sainz right behind you. I don't even know how many times he's been a World Rally champion. Peter Hensel, Mr. Dakar. No one else has won the Dakar as many times as he has. Nasser Al-Attiyah, who, well, just wants to catch up to Peter Hensel. I mean, he'll never really catch up because he never raced on motorcycles. But then there was also Sebastian Loeb, Nani Roma. Tell me, are you the youngest? Definitely the youngest among the front runners in this group. And you probably have the least experience in cars too, right? Yeah, that's kind of how it is. So that's also a good sign that I'm competing with drivers who have been racing cars for much longer. Because while I'm an experienced competitor at Dakar, I'm also experienced in motorsport in general. But when it comes to cars themselves, it's really only been 5 or 6 years. And cars compared to, for example, motorcycles require a huge amount of theoretical knowledge, like how to set up the suspension. For example, looking at Carlos Sainz, who every morning tweaks those 2 clicks in the suspension somewhere just to be a little bit faster tomorrow. Well, that's exactly what I'm constantly learning, how to very quickly adapt to difficult conditions and always keep the car at the highest possible level. Also in the car, working with engineers and telemetry, these are things you have to learn over the years, because it's not just about keeping your foot flat on the gas and driving as fast as possible. Sometimes that alone won't let you win. You need to have the car set up in a way that allows you to go even faster. Is that what Rallycross was for? Is that basically a condensed rally school? Yes, Rallycross was one of the elements of that condensed learning, because in Rallycross I get to know a lot of new setups, right? Because that discipline as a whole lasts, a run is 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So you have to get an extremely good fast start, have the car set up perfectly, and everything has to come together in such a short period of time. So you're fighting for incredibly tiny fractions of a second. So that also made me stronger as a driver and a more experienced competitor. That's exactly what interested me the most, because you don't even have time to do WRC rallies in your schedule. And I think it translates the same way to both motorcycles and cars, that the more condensed the races are and the shorter the sprints, the more those setups really affect the car and the motorcycle. Of course, in Rallycross, the race is very short. So a lot is actually decided right at the start within those first 150 meters. Everything is basically determined maybe within 300 meters. But the start itself means a lot. For example, of course at Dakar it's a bit different, but if you look at the whole stage and then at the time gaps at the very end of the stage, it turns out that the differences are about, I don't know, a second, less than a second per kilometer. So less than a second per kilometer is sometimes really just a single lift off the throttle. So even on a 400 kilometer stage, we're fighting for fractions of a second. And that's also very difficult because, for example, in Dakar, it's really hard to maintain top speed in every type of terrain. Sometimes there are places where you have to slow down a lot, and sometimes you can go extremely fast. So you have to constantly adjust your speed, because suddenly the pace changes, the average speed of the stage changes, and suddenly everyone either gets lost or there are a lot of accidents, for example, because the terrain has changed completely, right? You're driving across a flat desert with sand, and suddenly you find yourself in the mountains with rocks. Concentration is also a mystery to me, because I imagine you can be fully focused during a race that lasts 5 or 10 minutes in rallycross. How long does a stage usually last on average? If you had to guess, how many hours does a stage last? That kind of full concentration. So let's say it's about 4 or 5 hours every day. How is that possible? It's difficult. One technique I can share, for example, is that after 2 or 3 hours, when I start to feel distracted, I begin repeating a single digit in my head, and then it's very easy for the mind to focus on one very simple thing. So the rest starts to work very quickly on reflexes, and you kind of come back with that concentration. Although yes, it's difficult. It's hard to endure, but all the top competitors really push all the way to the end. It's not like you ride 300 kilometers and in the last 100 everyone is barely moving. No, it's all about catching those seconds the whole time, and often it's the last 10 or 20 kilometers that are decisive, because the differences are almost identical, and in the final kilometers you can gain even more time. So it's complicated, but what really keeps us on edge with adrenaline and focused is definitely the navigation, because this year it was like there was something difficult at every turn. So honestly, you couldn't let up until the very end, because something could always throw you off balance.
The car was also completely new for you this year. How do you go about getting a factory Toyota car? Do you just say, "Hello, I'm Kuba. I'd like one, please"? And do they say, "All right, you can have a car like that"?
At this point, I say, "Hello, I'm Kuba," and that's enough, although it actually takes a lot of work, and you definitely need to have sporting results and be fast. So to make it simple, that's kind of how it looked this year. Although our Toyota Hilux performed, you could say, perfectly, we didn't have any problems. Everything was just as it should be, meaning the car was reliable from the first stage to the last. So that was the most important thing, because that's always a source of stress. Even the best, most thoroughly tested car can always break down at the Dakar, because there are so many variables, the terrain is so tough, and it lasts so long that it's really not that easy. So our car made it through. It was produced in South Africa by the Toyota Gazoo racing factory, and it didn't give up, so I'm happy about that.
How many cars in this specification were in the rally?
There were a few cars. Of course, Nasser Al-Attiyah was driving Giniel de Villiers, and there were a few identical cars.
How do you compare it to the Mini, which is probably the vehicle you have driven the most rally kilometers in, perhaps more than any other car?
I actually started my career in rally cars with the Mini, so I knew that car the best. You could say that in terms of speed, the cars are very similar, but the Toyota definitely handles much better. It's more agile, more like a rally car. That's partly due to the suspension geometry, and is definitely much more comfortable over bumps and potholes. But at the end of the stage, if you compare these cars, they're practically identical, and that's the point, to let the drivers compete, so that it's a contest of skill, not equipment.
That Toyota sounds good.
It sounds good because we've got a 5-liter Volt 8 engine, so you could say it's a classic big gasoline engine where every gear shift makes it pop and crackle, and it definitely leaves an impression.
I just wanted to briefly find out how things look, because the years are what they are, and it's not just a year anymore, it's years now, the way things are. How has Dakar changed with all these restrictions? Was it very different?
There were restrictions. It's good that there were, but fortunately they didn't affect us. They definitely caused a bit of stress, because before departure we had to have a negative test done. Then after, when we arrived in Saudi Arabia, 48 hours of quarantine and another test. And then you wait for that second test with a bit of impatience, because really, if you get a positive result, that's it. A whole year of preparation, everything, you could say, well, the racing just ends right there. But even further, to expand on this topic, my co-driver is in the same situation. It's also risky for him. So if he, for example, were to get a positive result, then we also wouldn't be able to start. So it was quite a stressful moment at Dakar. Even after those tests, some people who took the test at the same time already had their results, but we didn't. And we didn't know why, so there was some stress. And only the next day did our results come in. So that night wasn't very pleasant, because you just never know. But fortunately, everything went well. And later, once we all entered the camp and everyone was negative, there were no problems at all. Of course, we wore masks, some distance was maintained, but nothing else happened. And after Dakar, everyone took tests, and in fact, it turned out that the entire camp returned negative to Europe.
So it was sterile.
Sterile, and it worked well here. The system worked very well.
Speaking of the system, the navigation system, electronic roadbooks, what did Timo tell you after the first stage?
Timo told me after the first stage that it's hard to read that iPad, because the biggest difference is that before, the co-drivers used to hold the roadbook in their hands. So with all those vibrations, they could kind of use their hands to make it a bit easier for themselves. And now this iPad is permanently attached to the dashboard, where it shakes along with the whole car. So it's much harder to visually see what the co-driver needs to read. So that was definitely the first major difficulty. And the second difficulty was that all the maps are uploaded in the morning right before the stage. So the co-driver is really navigating live. He reads something from the roadbook, has to relay it to me. I have to see it. And we're driving, as fast as possible, like 160, 180 kilometers per hour. And suddenly he says, right after that tree, left after that palm, onto the dune between those rocks. And it all happens really fast because 100 or 200 meters is often just half a second. So you often see something and you already have to be there.
Incredible. But at the same time, you mentioned that thanks to this, the co-driver later had more time. Didn't he feel lost after the stage?
This year, for the first time in history, the co-drivers had a lot of time. The drivers were already used to it in the cars, and now the co-driver's rhythm has changed a bit, but I think everyone benefited from it a little because the chances became much more even. It's kind of like no one is really working more. You don't have to sacrifice sleep because everyone simply has the same chance in the morning. You get the roadbook and you just have to suddenly start reading from it. Of course, the ones who benefited the most were definitely the motorcyclists because they don't have to prepare it, so they have more time to recover, which simply makes them stronger. And there's also less time-related stress at the bivouac, so I think it's a good direction, and that's how it will be in the future.
Exactly. Let's not forget about the motorcyclists, since this is a motorcycle channel after all, but we have a soft spot for you because, first of all, you're pole in the biggest rally, and besides, you're a motorcyclist yourself. It's just that you chose to be in a car, but still, motorcyclist. I was really hoping that these new roadbooks, this leveling of the playing field, and the greater opportunity for recovery would improve safety. The first week looked promising because there were no serious accidents. Unfortunately, the second week showed that they did happen. In your opinion, was it the difficult terrain, the navigation, or maybe just a tightly packed group? Because the times, both in cars and motorcycles, were extremely close. Did that make people, for example, start pushing harder in the second week? What do you think was the reason?
The way it was at this Dakar was kind of like for the first 5 days, it was very fast. And then suddenly on the sixth stage, as I remember, the pace completely changed. So from very fast stages where you're fighting for every bit of throttle, really trying to keep it wide open over every crest, suddenly the terrain shifts to something more like Morocco, huge holes, very difficult navigation, tons of rocks. You have to start paying more attention to your equipment rather than just riding as fast as possible. And that was very difficult for everyone to grasp because it's hard to switch to that different rhythm so quickly. And for sure, on motorcycles, just as in cars, the rocks, the sheer number of rocks in the second week made things much more difficult. In the car, the problem was that we kept getting tire punctures. So it was a problem, but not as much as on motorcycles, where, as motorcyclists say, you basically have to spot every single rock in front of you. And when you're faced with an endless stretch of rocks, well, eventually every single rock is going to throw you off. There were a lot of crashes, and that's why so many accidents happened there. It's hard to say how to do it differently in the future, because it was good that the rally was slower in the second week, that it was more technical, but is having so many rocks really the right direction? Well, I don't really know either, but if you don't have rocks, then it gets very fast. And then not everyone is happy with that either. It's definitely difficult.
I think Saudi Arabia is trying to find that balance because the first one, which was extremely fast, was just too fast. I was honestly shocked because as the rally was going on, this must have been stage 6, I was watching the coverage and I couldn't believe it. At times it looked more like a cross-country rally than a typical Dakar rally. Do you think they'll be able to find that balance? Because you guys have basically already crossed all of Saudi Arabia.
Well, there's a lot of terrain, so you could say it's the whole thing, but it's kind of like crossing Poland. Only one stage goes through Poland because that's about the same distance. So in Poland, you could, I don't know, drive through the Błędów desert and have more sand. But if you go near the mountains, you'll have more rock, so to speak. So there's a lot of room for creativity here. There would definitely have to be some kind of idea thought up here. It might be that the cars will drive more over those rocks, while the motorcycles will take a route, I don't know, that's more sandy without rocks. Well, we'll see how it goes next year.
Tire slicing, master of vulcanization. You and Timo, 13?
Yes, 13 punctured tires. We are definitely not the record holders. There were many stronger record holders, but the number of cut tires was, well, it was also part of the whole game at Dakar this year, because on one stage we cut 4 tires. But it's not like these tires get cut very easily. It's like when you're driving down an endless road full of rocks, going really fast, and every so often one of those rocks cuts your tire. But a million others before didn't, so you never know which rock is going to be the one that actually slices your tire. And there was a bit of a risky moment because we cut 4 tires, we had 3 spares, so we were already short one, and we couldn't keep going, we had to repair it. So we lost time.
How do you repair a tire that's been cut by a rock in the desert?
There are these, you could say, vulcanization strips, these strips that you press into the tire, and of course we stuffed a lot of those strips in there, and it worked for a while, and we managed to go another 100 kilometers, but with 100 kilometers left to the finish, there was nothing more we could do, and one competitor helped us out, gave us a wheel, and we made it to the finish.
Okay. You can predict that, and you can't just say that the rocks in Arabia are somehow different. Because these problems, what was your record in previous Dakars?
In South America, we never had that kind of problem at all. Okay, if you got a flat tire when you hit a rock that was too big, then that was a mistake, but you could predict what would happen. And here, it's like there are rocks hidden somewhere under the sand, so when the wheel is working, you can't see the rock, and it just cuts the tire at the moment when we're driving, and you don't even feel it. So that was the hardest thing for us to understand how and when it happens. We'll see what happens next year, because for sure this year the buggy cars had it a bit easier, meaning the rear-wheel drive cars, because they have bigger tires, more rubber, and they didn't get cut. We'll see what the idea will be for next year to make these 2 cars even more equal, because after all we're all racing in the same class, so the most important thing is for it to be as fair as possible.
I was going to ask about this later, but I'll ask now since we're talking about buggies. Have you ever tested such a car? Are you tempted to try it out?
I drove a mini buggy in Dubai, and we won the competition with that car, so it was a car, it's a very fast and very good car. Back then it was still a bit unreliable, you could say, so we didn't race in that car, but our Toyota is actually a really great and fast car. It's just a matter of those rocks, which no one expected would be like that. But there's some regulatory idea to level the playing field between these cars. Either in our 4x4 cars we'll have bigger tires, or maybe the buggy cars will have a bit less power, and then we'll be able to compete on equal terms right away.
How did this rally go for you, more or less, stage by stage? When did you sense blood that you were really close? Or did you just push hard from the very beginning? What was your strategy there? Let's go through it briefly.
We pushed from the very first stage, right from the prologue. We knew right away that we had to attack, because I knew that there would definitely be a fight at the end. For you never really know how a race will unfold, but in this competition you have to go hard from the start, to be in a really good group of athletes, to stay close to the top spots, to ride among the fast competitors, because then the pace itself pulls you forward. So even on the last stage, even with a pretty good lead over Nani Roma, you had to stay alert, because that section had very difficult rocks. There were lots of tough dunes where you could get stuck for a moment and lose everything. Getting a car stuck in the sand can cost you 5 minutes, but it can just as easily be 30, 40 minutes, or even an hour, and suddenly the results change completely. Or you could get lost for 20 minutes. So really, time flies by very quickly. So up until the last stage, we were extremely vigilant.
How is it actually? I'm just asking about things that intrigue me, because when we watch the coverage, there are just a few shots. Of course, there are helicopters flying around, you're being filmed by several camera operators, but the distances are 800, 900 kilometers. Do you have moments when I don't know, you talk about Arabia, discuss things, or maybe I don't know, admire the scenery? Because for example, I often watch amateurs reports from Dakar to get to know the real Dakar, because what we see as Dakar isn't really everything that happens there. Like, how are things in Arabia, the liaisons, and how do you experience all of it?
It's kind of true that, first of all, at the front of the pack and on the special stage itself, it's just a fight for those seconds, so we don't really pay much attention to what's going on around us. We only focus on what's ahead of us, on the route, and on getting through it as fast as possible. We also have a lot of liaison sections, meaning 100 or 200 kilometers on asphalt in the morning, and another 100 or 200 kilometers on asphalt in the afternoon. And those liaison sections definitely show us what the country looks like, because we're not racing there, we're just driving so we can take in the sights. Although Saudi Arabia is a funny country, because for the most part it's completely flat, just flat as far as the eye can see, and then suddenly there are either massive mountains or huge rocks jutting out, but everywhere else is still flat, so that's the kind of landscape it has. So that's definitely something we saw. The Red Sea definitely made an impression on us since we were right by it and started off there. We drove a stage where there was this blue expanse of water, and everyone immediately thought of vacations and how nice it would be, maybe instead of racing today, to just relax a bit. So that's definitely the part where we do the most sightseeing. Although it's not really the kind of sightseeing you'd like, because you're still constantly focused.
In South America, there were crowds of fans. Some even said that the crowds were too big for Dakar. In Arabia, those fans are starting to show up too. We see those photos not before the special stage, but how do you perceive those people?
In South America, there were tons of fans. There were millions of people cheering along the liaison sections. Leaving the bivouac at 4:03 in the morning, there were people everywhere all the time. America, Saudi Arabia is different. Of course, there are fewer people, but the fans there seem to be much more into motorsport, because many times those fans would stand in places where you could really see the sheer speed of the car. They would stand on the inside of a corner where it was safe, but later, when those shots from their phones would reach us, they were really impressive. So it seemed like they had a better sense of how to film, or maybe they just drive those cars for fun themselves on the dunes, on the sand. So they were definitely more experienced fans.
As for interpersonal relations, how does the top of the field react to you? Because after all, you're a young guy from Poland, and now you're starting to, well, beat some of them. Well, Sebastian Loeb, I think he takes these Dakars a bit hard, being used to winning so many times. Do you have any kind of relationship, or is it like in every top motorsport? We respect each other, say hi and goodbye, or how does it look at Dakar?
Of course, we definitely respect each other. I definitely get along with Carlos Sainz, because whether it's before or after a stage, we talk a lot. Mostly before, because that's when there's the most time, so I have a really good relationship with him. You could say it's a friendly, collegial conversation. Whether it's Carlos or Stefan Peter Hansel, it's the same. Everyone is great. For sure, I have. I am respected because I am also a young driver who has started to show up here, and that's definitely nice as well. For sure, when we're out on the stage, everyone knows that we won't give up, we'll fight, that you have to watch out for us, that we'll probably handle the navigation. So we're definitely among the front runners in these cars that are competing.
Finally, let me ask you about our Polish motorcyclists. Well, they had some bad luck this year. You have some space. We saw a bit of it. You showed up at their bivouacs. You still have the opportunity to look after them a bit, to give some advice. However, they're getting more and more experience, so they should also be increasingly independent.
For example, I talked quite a lot with Maciej Giemza this year, because he also had more time since he wasn't working on the Roadbook, which is where that came from. So we talked. As much as I could, I always tried to give advice, although things are always changing. Things are constantly changing. These competitions are a bit different every year. You have to deal with different challenges. But I think some of the tips I gave, Maciej is using them somewhere, because he had a very good motorcycle. Everything worked well technically, so it's always nice to see how the bike changes too, how it develops technically. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for the guys. For sure, Maciej was at that turning point, that breakthrough moment where he went from a high speed to a slow pace, and he just, well, somewhere along the way he fell and wasn't able to finish. And if he had made it through that section, he would have been ready for the next ones. Those are such technically difficult sections, and he wouldn't have let it get to him anymore.
These motorcycles really Cars are impressive in terms of competition, but motorcycles, I'm starting to get personally scared. Because the pace set by the leaders, when I look at it, I don't know most of them. Well, I know our guys, our Polish riders, but I don't know the others. And now I'm just worried about all of those motorcyclists. When you talk at the bivouac, do you feel that the respect for motorcyclists is growing? Do you, and especially you, since you used to ride motorcycles and now you drive cars, ever walk along the stage and think, damn, you really shouldn't be going this fast on these motorcycles?
The motorcycles are going really fast. Well, motorcycles have always gone fast, for sure. That's kind of how it's always been. I think motorcycles have always gone fast, but now cars are going even faster simply because car technology has advanced so much. While in motorcycles, well, there's just a huge race going on. What's cool about motorcycles is that in terms of equipment, almost all the bikes are practically identical. So the competition between different manufacturers is very close. Of course, there's a huge amount of stress because it's very easy to make a mistake over the course of several minutes. As you could see in the results on day, one rider would win and the next day he would lose a lot because opening the route is very difficult. So things changed a lot, but that's definitely how it's going to be for sure. The airbag system that motorcyclists have now is really great. When there's a crash, a sensor detects the overload and the airbag inflates, making it much safer. So that's definitely a good direction.
All right, then. So what now? We're keeping our fingers crossed for changes in the regulation, so you won't have to tinker with your car too much. And when are the first starts in the World Cup?
For now, we'll definitely start more with drifting, meaning with the car that's standing behind us, although it doesn't look the part yet. And in the second half of the year, we'll be considering and looking at the World Cup calendar because that part of the year is a bit decisive before Dakar.
All right, we're rooting for you. 2 times 4th place. Well, if you finish the next one, I think it can't get any worse.
Great, thanks a lot, thank you. I'm cheering for you, bye.